In the grand halls of Valdoria Palace, where golden chandeliers cast dancing shadows on marble floors, a secret so dangerous lurks that it could topple an entire kingdom. What happens when the person closest to the throne becomes the greatest threat to it? When love turns to betrayal and loyalty transforms into vengeance. This is not just another tale of royal romance gone wrong. This is the story of how Queen Alara of Valdoria nearly destroyed the very crown she swore to protect, and how one loyal guard's testimony would change the course of history forever. The truth behind the palace walls is darker than any fairy tale, and more shocking than any scandal the kingdom has ever known. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of Valdoria Palace, casting rainbow patterns across the polished marble floor where Captain Marcus Thorne stood at attention. As the head of the royal guard, Marcus had witnessed many secrets within these ancient walls, but nothing had prepared him for what he would discover on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday in autumn. Queen Alara moved through the corridors like a shadow, her emerald silk gown rustling softly against the stone floors. To the untrained eye, she appeared as regal and composed as always, but Marcus noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers trembled slightly as they gripped the ornate railing of the grand staircase. Something was different about the queen today, something that made the seasoned guard's instincts prickle with unease. King Adrian of Valdoria sat in his private study, unaware that his beloved wife had spent the entire night pacing her chambers, her mind consumed with thoughts that would have horrified him. The king, a man of 42 with kind eyes and graying temples, had ruled Valdoria with wisdom and compassion for nearly 2 decades. His marriage to Alara had been celebrated throughout the kingdom as a true love match, rare among royal unions that were typically arranged for political gain. But love, Marcus had learned through years of observing the royal family, could be the most dangerous emotion of all when it curdled into something darker. The first sign that something was amiss came during the morning's royal breakfast. Marcus stood his customary post near the entrance to the dining hall, his trained eyes scanning the room as they did every day. The king sat at the head of the long mahogany table, reading correspondence while his food grew cold. Queen Alara sat to his right, barely touching her meal, her gaze fixed intently on her husband's profile. "My lord," she said, her voice carrying a strange intensity that made Marcus straighten slightly. "You seem tired. Perhaps you should rest more. The kingdom's affairs are demanding so much of your energy." King Adrian looked up from his letters, his face brightening at his wife's concern. "You're thoughtful as always, my dear. But there's much to be done with the harvest festival approaching. The people depend on these celebrations, especially after such a difficult year with the drought." "The people," Queen Alara repeated, and Marcus caught something bitter in her tone that the king seemed to miss entirely. "Yes, always the people first." The conversation continued in this vein, with the queen making seemingly caring suggestions about the king's health and schedule, while the king responded with his usual dedication to his duties. To anyone listening casually, it would sound like a devoted wife worried about her husband's well-being. But Marcus had been trained to notice details others missed, and he was beginning to detect a pattern that troubled him deeply. Over the following days, Marcus observed Queen Alara's behavior with growing concern. She had begun taking unusual interest in the king's daily routines, asking detailed questions about his meetings, his meals, his private moments of rest. She inquired about which servants had access to his chambers, which guards were on duty at what times, and which routes he typically took through the palace. The queen had also started spending considerable time with Dr. Aldrich Blackwood, the royal physician. These meetings, which she claimed were about her own health, always took place in her private chambers rather than the physician's offices. Marcus found this odd, as the queen had always been in excellent health and had never shown particular interest in medical matters. Dr. Blackwood himself was a thin, nervous man with pale skin and darting eyes who had served the royal family for only 2 years. Unlike his predecessor, Dr. Henshaw, who had been beloved by the entire palace staff, Blackwood kept to himself and seemed uncomfortable around others. Marcus had noticed that the physician often left the queen's chambers carrying small leather bags that he hadn't brought with him. The turning point came on a rainy evening in late October. Marcus was conducting his usual rounds when he heard voices coming from a rarely used tower room. The conversation was too muffled to understand, but he recognized Queen Alara's voice along with another that sounded like Dr. Blackwood. Moving closer, Marcus positioned himself where he could hear more clearly without being detected. "Are you certain it will be undetectable?" Queen Alara was asking, her voice tight with tension. "Completely, Your Majesty," came Blackwood's reply, his words nervous and rushed. "The substance I've prepared mimics the symptoms of a heart attack perfectly. Given the king's age and the stress of his position, no one would question such a diagnosis." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. The conversation continued, with the queen asking detailed questions about timing, dosage, and symptoms. She wanted to know exactly how long the substance would take to work, whether the king would suffer, and how quickly death would follow. "It must appear natural," she insisted. "There can be no suspicion, no investigation. The kingdom must believe their beloved king simply succumbed to the pressures of leadership." Dr. Blackwood assured her that everything would appear completely natural. The substance he had created was derived from rare plants found only in the remote mountains of the neighboring kingdom of Astoria. It was virtually unknown to physicians in Valdoria, and its effects would be attributed to natural causes. As Marcus listened to these horrifying plans, his mind raced with questions. Why would Queen Alara, who had seemed so devoted to her husband, want him dead? What could possibly drive her to such an extreme betrayal? And what was he, as head of the royal guard sworn to protect the king, supposed to do with this knowledge? The conversation in the tower room continued for another hour, with the queen and the physician discussing details that made Marcus's stomach turn. They talked about the upcoming harvest festival, during which the king would be making public appearances throughout the kingdom. It would be the perfect time, they agreed, because the king would be traveling and staying in various locations, making it easier to administer the poison without suspicion falling on anyone in the palace. When the meeting finally ended, Marcus retreated to his quarters, his mind spinning with the implications of what he had heard. He was faced with an impossible choice: expose the queen's plot and throw the kingdom into chaos, or remain silent and allow his king to be murdered by the woman who shared his bed. As he sat in his small chamber, staring at the flickering candlelight, Marcus thought about his oath of loyalty to the crown. He had sworn to protect the king with his life, but he had also sworn loyalty to the queen. How could he choose between them? And even if he decided to act, who would believe such an incredible accusation against the beloved Queen Alara? The weight of knowledge pressed down on him like a physical burden. Marcus knew that within days, possibly hours, he would have to make a decision that would change the course of Aldoria's history forever. The question was not whether he had the courage to act, but whether he could live with the consequences of either choice. Outside his window, the rain continued to fall, washing the palace walls clean, while inside, the darkest conspiracy in the kingdom's history was beginning to unfold. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining to the people of Aldoria how their beloved queen had become their greatest enemy, and how he, a simple soldier, had been forced to choose between loyalty and justice. The night stretched ahead of him, long and sleepless, filled with the terrible knowledge that by dawn he would have to decide the fate of kings and queens, and the future of an entire kingdom would rest in his hands. The next morning brought no relief from the torment that had kept Marcus awake throughout the night. As he dressed in his crisp uniform and prepared for another day of service, every familiar routine felt different now that he carried the weight of the queen's terrible secret. The palace around him seemed transformed, its beautiful corridors now feeling like a maze of deception where danger lurked behind every ornate door. Marcus made his way to the king's chambers for the morning briefing, his steps heavy with the knowledge of what Queen Alara was planning. King Adrian greeted him with his usual warm smile, completely unaware that his most trusted guard now knew of the plot against his life. "Marcus, my faithful friend," the king said, using the informal tone he reserved for private moments with his most trusted advisors. "I've been thinking about the harvest festival route. The people in the northern villages have had such a difficult year with the drought. I want to make sure we spend extra time there, perhaps even stay an additional night in Millbrook." The irony was not lost on Marcus that the king's compassion for his people was potentially making him more vulnerable to his wife's scheme. More time traveling, more nights spent in unfamiliar places, more opportunities for Queen Alara to carry out her plan without being detected. "Your Majesty," Marcus began carefully, "perhaps it would be wise to reconsider some aspects of the festival route. The security arrangements for extended stays can be challenging." King Adrian laughed, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. Always thinking of my safety, aren't you? But the people need to see their king, especially during difficult times. We'll make do with whatever arrangements are necessary. As the king spoke about his plans to personally distribute grain to struggling families, Marcus felt a deep admiration for the man he served, mixed with a growing determination to protect him. King Adrian was not perfect, but he was genuinely devoted to his people's welfare. He deserved better than to be murdered by the woman he loved. Later that morning, Marcus conducted his own investigation, using his authority as head of the royal guard to access areas of the palace normally off-limits to others. He began in the physician's quarters, where Dr. Blackwood kept his supplies and records. The physician was attending to a minor injury in the stables, giving Marcus a few precious minutes to search. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Hidden behind a false back in one of Blackwood's cabinets, Marcus discovered a collection of exotic plants and vials containing various substances. Among them was a detailed journal written in the physician's spidery handwriting, documenting experiments with different poisons and their effects. The entries grew progressively more specific about substances that could mimic natural death, with particular attention to those that affected the heart. Most damning of all was a pressed flower between the pages of the journal, labeled in Blackwood's hand as Mountain's Kiss with a note that read, "Undetectable after death, symptoms identical to cardiac failure. Dose, 3 drops in wine or water. Effect, 15 to 20 minutes. Marcus carefully replaced everything exactly as he had found it, but not before noting every detail. The evidence was clear, but he knew it wouldn't be enough to convince anyone without additional proof of the Queen's involvement. A physician studying poisons might be explained away as professional curiosity or preparation for treating poisoning victims. His next stop was the tower room, where he had overheard the previous night's conversation. In the daylight, he could see it more clearly. A small chamber that had once been used for stargazing, but had been abandoned for years. Dust covered most surfaces, but Marcus noticed areas where the dust had been disturbed recently. Near the window, he found something that made his heart race. A small piece of emerald silk, the same color as the gown Queen Alara had been wearing. As he examined the fabric, Marcus heard footsteps on the spiral staircase leading to the tower. He quickly pocketed the evidence and moved to the window, pretending to check the security of the tower's defenses. When Queen Alara appeared at the top of the stairs, he turned and bowed formally. "Your Majesty, I was inspecting this tower as part of the security preparations for the Harvest Festival. There have been concerns about potential vantage points that could be used by those who might wish to harm the royal family." Queen Alara's face remained composed, but Marcus caught a flash of something dangerous in her eyes. "How thorough of you, Captain Thorne. I trust you found nothing concerning." "Nothing immediate, Your Majesty. Though I do wonder why you've chosen to visit this particular location. It's quite isolated and not typically of interest to members of the royal family." The Queen moved closer, and Marcus could smell her perfume, a complex scent of roses, and something else he couldn't identify. "I was feeling nostalgic. Adrian and I used to come here early in our marriage to watch the stars. It seemed like a romantic place to remember happier times." Her explanation was smooth and believable, but Marcus noticed that her eyes never left his face, studying his reaction carefully. She was testing him, he realized, trying to determine how much he might have seen or heard. "I understand completely, Your Majesty. Romance is important in any marriage, especially one that bears the pressure of ruling a kingdom." "Indeed," Queen Alara replied, her voice soft but her gaze sharp, "though sometimes romance must give way to more practical considerations. A queen must always think of what's best for the kingdom, even when it conflicts with her personal feelings." The conversation felt like a careful dance, with both participants saying one thing while meaning something entirely different. Marcus was increasingly certain that the Queen suspected he knew something, which put him in even greater danger than before. That afternoon brought more disturbing revelations. While reviewing the travel arrangements for the Harvest Festival, Marcus discovered that Queen Alara had made several unusual requests. She had specifically asked that Dr. Blackwood accompany the royal party, claiming she needed medical support for a condition that required daily monitoring. She had also requested that certain longtime servants be left behind, replaced by newer staff members whose loyalty was less certain. Most telling of all, she had insisted that the king's food and wine be prepared by a specific kitchen maid named Vera. a young woman who had been hired only recently, and who seemed unusually nervous whenever she was around other staff members. Marcus made a mental note to investigate Vera's background and her connection to Queen Alara. As evening approached, Marcus found himself in an impossible position. He had gathered enough evidence to be certain of the Queen's intentions, but not enough to prove them to others. Even worse, he was increasingly certain that Queen Alara knew he was suspicious. Every conversation between them had become a careful verbal chess match, with each trying to determine what the other knew. The situation became even more complicated when Prince Edmund, the king and Queen's 18-year-old son, sought out Marcus for a private conversation. The young prince had always been observant and intelligent, with a sensitivity to the moods and undercurrents of palace life that sometimes surprised the adults around him. "Captain Thorne," Edmund began, his voice troubled, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is my mother ill?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What makes you ask that, Your Highness?" "She's been acting strangely lately, distant, preoccupied, and I've seen her meeting with Dr. Blackwood frequently, but she claims she's fine when I ask about it. My father doesn't seem to notice anything unusual, but—" Edmund paused, looking older than his 18 years. "But I'm worried about her. About both of them, really." Marcus felt his heart break a little for the young prince, who sensed that something was wrong in his family, but had no idea how terrible the truth really was. How could he tell Edmund that his mother was planning to murder his father? How could anyone be expected to bear such knowledge? "Your mother loves your father very much," Marcus said carefully, choosing his words with extreme care. "But sometimes the pressures of royal life can affect people in unexpected ways. If you're concerned, perhaps you should spend more time with both of your parents in the coming days." Edmund studied Marcus's face intently. "You know something, don't you? Something about what's bothering her. I know that your family is precious to this kingdom, and that sometimes those who care about you most need to be protected, even when they don't realize they're in danger." It was as close to the truth as Marcus dared come, but he could see that Edmund understood more than he was saying. The prince nodded slowly, his expression grave. "If there's anything I can do to help protect my family, you only need to ask." As Edmund walked away, Marcus realized that the circle of people who sensed something was wrong was growing larger. Soon, it might become impossible to contain the situation quietly. The thought of the scandal that would engulf the kingdom if Queen Alara's plot became public knowledge filled him with dread. That night, Marcus made his decision. He would not let King Adrian be murdered, regardless of the consequences. But he also knew that simply exposing the queen would not be enough. He needed to find a way to stop her plan while protecting the royal family from the devastating scandal that would follow if the truth became known. As he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, Marcus began to formulate a dangerous plan of his own. It would require precise timing, enormous risk, and a willingness to sacrifice his own future for the sake of the king he had sworn to protect. But he could see no other way to save Adrian's life without destroying the kingdom in the process. The Harvest Festival was only 3 days away, and time was running out faster than autumn leaves falling from the palace trees. The weight of his decision settled over Marcus like armor as he began the most dangerous phase of his plan. With only 3 days remaining before the Harvest Festival, he knew he had to move carefully, but decisively. The morning brought an unseasonable chill to Valdoria, as if the very air sensed the darkness brewing within the palace walls. Marcus started his day by seeking out Prince Edmund, finding the young man in the library where he often studied the histories of neighboring kingdoms. The prince looked up as Marcus approached, and there was a maturity in his eyes that reminded the guard captain of just how much the royal family had at stake. "Your Highness," Marcus began in a low voice, "I need to ask something of you that may seem strange, but I assure you it's for the protection of your father." Edmund closed his book and gave Marcus his full attention. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to suggest to the king that his wine at meals should be served only by you, personally, for the duration of the festival journey. Tell him it's a gesture of filial devotion that would mean much to the people to witness." The request clearly puzzled Edmund, but the young prince had inherited his father's intuitive understanding of when to trust those who serve the crown faithfully. "And what reason should I give for this sudden interest in serving wine?" "Tell him you've been reading about ancient traditions where princes served their fathers as a symbol of the continuity of the royal line. The people would find such symbolism meaningful during these difficult times." Edmund studied Marcus's face for a long moment. This has something to do with mother's strange behavior, doesn't it? Marcus chose his words with extreme care. Your mother is under great stress. Sometimes people under such pressure make decisions they wouldn't normally make. By ensuring that you're the one serving your father's wine, you're helping to protect him from any complications that might arise. Understanding dawned in Edmund's eyes, along with a fear that made Marcus wish he could spare the young man from this knowledge. But Edmund was no longer a child, and the circumstances demanded his participation if King Adrian was to be saved. I understand, Edmund said quietly. I'll make the suggestion this afternoon. Marcus's next stop was more dangerous. He needed to confront Dr. Blackwood directly, but in a way that wouldn't alert Queen Alara to his suspicions. He found a physician in his quarters, preparing medications for the upcoming journey. Dr. Blackwood, Marcus said, closing the door behind him. I need to discuss security arrangements for the king's health during the festival tour. The physician looked up nervously, his pale hands trembling slightly as he set down a vial of clear liquid. Of course, Captain. What concerns do you have? I'm concerned about the possibility of someone attempting to poison the king during his travels. As you know, there are always those who might wish to harm the royal family for political reasons. Blackwood's face went even paler, if that were possible. Poison? That seems quite an extreme concern. Surely our security measures are adequate. Perhaps, Marcus said, moving closer to the physician's work table. But I would feel more comfortable if you could tell me about the symptoms someone might display if they were poisoned. That way, I could recognize the signs and get immediate help. The request was perfectly reasonable from a security standpoint, but Marcus watched carefully as Blackwood stammered through a generic explanation of poisoning symptoms. The man was clearly terrified, beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Is there any particular poison I should be most concerned about? Marcus pressed. Perhaps something that might mimic natural illness? At this question, Blackwood nearly dropped the vial he was holding. There are many such substances, but they're quite rare. Certainly nothing that would be readily available to potential assassins. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Dr. Blackwood, I think we both know that you're involved in something that puts the king's life at risk. I also think you might not have realized just how serious the consequences of your actions will be. The physician's composure cracked entirely. I never wanted, she said it was the only way to save the kingdom. That the king's policies were leading to disaster, and that someone with a stronger hand was needed to guide Valdoria through the coming difficulties. Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Queen Alara. She's been meeting with advisors from Astoria. They've convinced her that King Adrian's gentle approach to governance is weakness, and that our enemies will exploit it. She believes that if something were to happen to the king, she could rule as regent until Prince Edmund comes of age, but with policies guided by Astoria's more aggressive strategies. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Queen Alara wasn't just planning to murder her husband out of personal ambition. She had been manipulated by foreign agents who wanted to control Valdoria through her. The scope of the conspiracy was far larger and more dangerous than he had imagined. What did she promise you in return for your help? Marcus asked. Protection for my family. I have a sister in Astoria who they threatened to harm if I didn't cooperate. I never wanted to hurt the king. He's been kind to me, but they said it would be quick and painless, and that it was for the greater good. Marcus felt a mixture of anger and pity for the frightened man before him. Blackwood was clearly being used just as much as Queen Alara was, caught in a web of foreign manipulation that none of them fully understood. Dr. Blackwood, I'm going to offer you a chance to redeem yourself, but it will require courage on your part. Are you willing to help me save the king and protect the kingdom? The physician nodded eagerly, tears of relief and fear streaming down his face. Yes, anything. Just tell me what to do. Marcus outlined his plan carefully. Blackwood would continue to appear cooperative with Queen Alara's scheme, but he would replace the actual poison with a harmless substance that would produce no effects whatsoever. In exchange, Marcus would ensure the physician's protection and help him get word to his sister in Astoria to flee to safety. But what about Queen Alara? Blackwood asked. When the king doesn't die, she'll know something went wrong. She might try another approach. Leave the queen to me, Marcus said grimly. But I need you to do something else as well. I need you to document everything. Every meeting you've had with her, every instruction she's given you, every detail about the foreign agents and their plans. Write it all down and give it to me before the festival begins. As Marcus left the physician's quarters, he felt a grim satisfaction that one part of his plan was in place. But he knew the most dangerous confrontation still lay ahead. He would have to face Queen Elara directly, and he would have to do it in a way that protected the kingdom from the scandal of her treason while ensuring she could never threaten the king again. That evening, Marcus requested a private audience with Queen Elara, claiming he needed to discuss additional security measures for the festival journey. She received him in her private sitting room, an elegant chamber decorated in shades of blue and gold that had always been her favorite colors. "Captain Thorne," she said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I trust your security preparations are proceeding smoothly." "They are, Your Majesty, though I've discovered some concerns that I felt you should be aware of." Queen Elara's posture stiffened slightly, but her voice remained composed. "What sort of concerns?" "Intelligence suggests that there may be foreign agents operating within the kingdom, possibly with connections to someone inside the palace. These agents appear to be planning some sort of action against the king during the festival." It was a calculated gamble, offering Queen Elara a way to understand that her conspiracy had been discovered without directly accusing her of treason. Marcus watched her face carefully, noting the subtle signs of fear and calculation that crossed her features. "Foreign agents?" she asked, her voice perhaps a bit too casual. "Do we know which kingdom they represent?" "Astoria, Your Majesty. It appears they've been working to influence palace staff, possibly even members of the royal household." The color drained from Queen Elara's face, and Marcus knew his suspicions had been confirmed. She had indeed been manipulated by Asturian agents, probably believing she was acting in Valdoria's best interests while actually serving their agenda to weaken the kingdom. What sort of influence are we talking about?" she asked, her composure beginning to crack. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Your Majesty, I believe you've been deceived by people who don't have Valdoria's best interests at heart. They've convinced you that drastic action is necessary to save the kingdom, but their real goal is to destabilize our government and make us vulnerable to foreign control." Queen Elara's facade crumbled completely. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the deepest parts of her soul. "I never wanted to hurt Adrian," she whispered through her tears. "They showed me documents, intelligence reports that suggested our enemies were preparing to invade. They said Adrian's peaceful policies were being interpreted as weakness, and that only decisive action could save our people. I thought I was protecting the kingdom." Marcus moved to kneel beside her chair, his voice compassionate despite the horror of what she had planned. "Your Majesty, your love for the kingdom is not in question, but you've been manipulated by people who are very skilled at exploiting the fears and loyalties of good people." "What happens now?" Elara asked, looking up at him with eyes red from crying. "Will I be executed for treason? Will the kingdom be destroyed by scandal?" "That depends on what you're willing to do to make this right," Marcus replied. "The king's life will be protected, and the Asturian plot will be stopped. But the question is whether you're prepared to help me ensure that this threat to Valdoria is eliminated permanently." Queen Elara straightened in her chair, and Marcus could see the strength that had made her a worthy partner for King Adrian beginning to reassert itself. "Tell me what you need me to do." As Marcus outlined his plan for dealing with the Asturian agents and protecting the kingdom from further foreign interference, he realized that this crisis might ultimately make the royal family stronger. Queen Elara's mistake had been terrible, but her willingness to face the consequences and work to correct it showed the character that had made her beloved by the people of Valdoria. The real test would come in the days ahead, when they would have to work together to turn the tables on the foreign agents who had nearly succeeded in destroying the kingdom from within. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as Marcus put the most complex phase of his plan into motion. Time was running short. The royal party would depart for the Harvest Festival in less than 48 hours, and every detail had to be perfect if they were going to turn Queen Elara's conspiracy against the Asturian agents who had orchestrated it. Marcus began by meeting with his most trusted guards, men who had served the kingdom faithfully for years and whose loyalty was beyond question. He gathered them in the old armory, a location where their conversation would not be overheard by anyone with questionable allegiances. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice serious and commanding, "I'm about to share information with you that concerns the highest levels of kingdom security. What I tell you must never leave this room, and I need your word that you'll follow my instructions without question, even if they seem to contradict normal protocols. The 5 guards, veteran soldiers all, nodded their agreement. These were men who had fought beside Marcus in border skirmishes, who had proven their courage and discretion time and again. There is a plot against the king's life, orchestrated by foreign agents who have infiltrated our court. The threat is immediate and will likely manifest during the Harvest Festival journey. I need each of you to take specific roles in protecting His Majesty while we gather evidence against the conspirators. Marcus assigned each guard a particular aspect of security, monitoring the food preparation, watching for suspicious communications, keeping track of Dr. Blackwood's movements, and maintaining discreet surveillance of certain palace staff members who might be compromised. Sir Thomas, he addressed his most senior lieutenant, I need you to coordinate with Prince Edmund on a special protocol for the king's meals. The prince will be personally serving his father's wine as a symbolic gesture, but I need you to ensure that no one else has access to the royal table during meals. And, Sir Gabriel, he continued, turning to another guard, you'll be working with Dr. Blackwood, who has seen the error of his ways and is now cooperating with us. He'll need protection, as a change of allegiance may put him in danger from the other conspirators. Meanwhile, Queen Alara was playing her own crucial role in the developing counter-conspiracy. She continued to meet with the Asturian agents as if nothing had changed, but now she was gathering intelligence about their broader plans and identifying all the players in their network. The most important of these meetings took place that afternoon in a private garden pavilion that the agents had been using for their clandestine communications. Queen Alara wore a concealed listening device that Marcus had obtained from a traveling merchant who dealt in such unusual items, allowing the captain to monitor the conversation from a nearby location. Your Majesty, said the lead Asturian agent, a man who had been posing as a silk merchant for several months, our plans are proceeding exactly as scheduled. Dr. Blackwood has confirmed that he has the necessary substance, and the timing during the festival journey will provide perfect cover. I've been having second thoughts, Queen Alara said, her voice carefully modulated to sound uncertain rather than defiant. Perhaps there's another way to achieve our goals without such drastic measures. The agent's tone hardened immediately. Your Majesty, we've discussed this extensively. Your kingdom faces threats that your husband is too naive to recognize. The intelligence reports we've shared with you make it clear that decisive action is necessary. But surely those reports could be presented to the king directly. If the threats are as serious as you claim, he would listen to reason. King Adrian's weakness is well known among the neighboring kingdoms. Even if he were presented with evidence, he would likely seek diplomatic solutions that our enemies would exploit. No, Your Majesty, the plan we've developed is the only way to save Valdoria from the disasters that await. As Marcus listened to the conversation, he realized how sophisticated the Asturian manipulation had been. They had spent months building a case that King Adrian's peaceful policies were dangerous, using carefully crafted intelligence reports and political analysis that would seem convincing to someone who genuinely loved her kingdom. The agent continued to pressure Queen Alara, reminding her of the supposed threats facing Valdoria and emphasizing that she was the only one with the courage to take necessary action. But Marcus could hear the underlying threats as well, subtle reminders that the agents had compromising information about her involvement in the plot, and that backing out now would have serious consequences. Understand the necessity, Queen Alara finally said, her voice resigned. But I want assurances that the transition of power will be smooth. The people must never suspect that anything other than natural death has occurred. Of course, Your Majesty. That's why Dr. Blackwood's expertise is so valuable. The substance he's prepared will leave no trace, and the king's age and the stresses of his position make such a death entirely believable. The meeting concluded with final arrangements for the timing of the poisoning attempt, which would take place during a formal dinner in the town of Millbrook, the king's third stop on the festival tour. The setting would provide numerous alibis for everyone involved, and the distance from the capital would delay any investigation until the agents had time to disappear. That evening, Marcus met with Queen Alara to discuss what they had learned and finalize their counterplan. The queen looked exhausted, the strain of maintaining her deception while dealing with her guilt taking a visible toll on her health. They're more dangerous than I realized, she admitted. The way they spoke about Adrian's death, as if it were just another political calculation. I don't know how I ever believed they cared about Valdoria's welfare. People who are skilled at manipulation know exactly which emotions to exploit, Marcus replied. Your love for the kingdom made you vulnerable to their arguments. But now we can use their confidence against them. The plan they had developed was complex, but elegant in its simplicity. Dr. Blackwood would prepare a harmless substitute for the poison, ensuring that King Adrian would suffer no ill effects when the substance was administered. Meanwhile, Marcus and his guard would be ready to arrest the Asturian agents the moment they attempted to carry out their plot, catching them in the act of treason against Valdoria. Queen Alara would play a crucial role by documenting the entire conspiracy, providing testimony that would implicate not only the agents operating in Valdoria, but also their superiors back in Astoria. This evidence would be valuable for diplomatic purposes, potentially preventing future attempts at subversion. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Marcus said carefully. After this is over, there will be questions about how the plot was discovered and why you were meeting with these agents in the first place. Queen Alara had clearly been thinking about this problem as well. I've been considering that. I think the truth, carefully presented, might actually strengthen the kingdom's position. The people need to understand that foreign powers are actively working against Valdoria, and that even their queen can be deceived by sophisticated enemies. You're prepared to accept the political consequences of that revelation? I'm prepared to accept whatever consequences are necessary to protect Adrian and our kingdom. My reputation is far less important than preventing future attempts at subversion. Marcus felt deep respect for the queen's willingness to sacrifice her standing for the greater good. It was this quality, he realized, that had made her vulnerable to the Asturian manipulation in the first place. Her genuine love for Valdoria and its people. The final element of their plan involved Prince Edmund, who had proven surprisingly adept at understanding the political implications of the situation. The young prince would not only serve his father's wine, but also help gather evidence by engaging the suspected agents in conversation, using his natural charm to encourage them to reveal details about their operation. Edmund has the makings of a fine king, Queen Alara said with obvious pride. This crisis has shown me that he's ready to take on real responsibility for the kingdom's welfare. As the meeting concluded, Marcus felt cautiously optimistic about their chances of success. The plan was risky, and there were numerous ways it could go wrong, but they had turned the conspiracy's own momentum against it. The Asturian agents were confident that their plot was proceeding smoothly, which would make them careless at the crucial moment. The next day would bring the departure for the Harvest Festival, and with it the final confrontation that would determine not only King Adrian's fate, but the future relationship between Valdoria and its ambitious neighbors. Marcus spent that final night making last-minute preparations, checking weapons, reviewing signals with his guards, and going over every detail of the plan one more time. As dawn approached, he stood at his window looking out over the kingdom that had been his home for so many years. Soon, he would know whether their desperate gamble had succeeded or whether Valdoria would face the chaos and uncertainty that would follow from the exposure of royal treason. But whatever happened, Marcus was determined that King Adrian would survive to see another sunrise, and that the kingdom would emerge stronger from this trial by fire. The morning of departure dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of brilliant autumn sunshine that made the Harvest Festival seem like a celebration of hope itself. As the royal caravan prepared to leave Valdoria Palace, Marcus conducted final security checks with an intensity that his guards had rarely seen before. Every detail mattered now, because within 3 days, their carefully orchestrated plan would either save the kingdom or expose them all to charges of treason. King Adrian was in excellent spirits as he reviewed the festival itinerary with his advisors, completely unaware of the conspiracy that had swirled around him for weeks. His enthusiasm for meeting with his people and participating in the harvest celebrations was genuine and infectious, reminding everyone why he was so beloved throughout Valdoria. Marcus, the king called as the captain approached, I want to thank you again for the extra security precautions. I know you think I'm sometimes too casual about these matters, but your diligence gives me the freedom to focus on what matters most, serving our people. It is my honor and duty, your majesty. Marcus replied, the weight of those words heavier than ever before. Prince Edmund joined them, looking every inch the future king as he supervised the loading of supplies. The young prince had thrown himself into his role with remarkable maturity, understanding that he was not just participating in a festival, but potentially helping to save his father's life. "Father," Edmund said, "I've been thinking about that tradition we discussed, serving your wine personally during the formal dinners. I believe it would send a powerful message about the continuity of our royal line, especially during these uncertain times." King Adrian smiled warmly at his son. "A thoughtful gesture, Edmund. The people would indeed find such symbolism meaningful." Queen Alara watched this exchange from across the courtyard, her face a mask of composed regality that concealed the turmoil beneath. She had spent the night writing detailed confessions and testimonies that would be opened only if something went wrong with their plan. If the worst happened, at least the truth about the Asturian conspiracy would survive to protect the kingdom. Dr. Blackwood appeared even more nervous than usual as he supervised the packing of medical supplies. Marcus had spoken with him one final time that morning, ensuring that the harmless substitute for the poison was properly prepared and that the physician understood his role in the coming confrontation. "Remember," Marcus had told him, "your testimony will be crucial for exposing the full scope of the Asturian operation. Your sister's safety depends on us succeeding, so stay calm and follow the plan exactly." The royal caravan departed at mid-morning, with crowds of citizens lining the road to wave farewell to their beloved king and queen. The irony was not lost on Marcus that many of the people cheering so enthusiastically had no idea how close their kingdom had come to losing its monarch to foreign treachery. The first day of travel passed without incident, as they made their way to the town of Greenhill for the festival's opening ceremonies. King Adrian participated in the traditional blessing of the harvest, spoke with farmers about their concerns, and distributed grain to families who had suffered during the drought. His genuine care for his people was evident in every interaction. That evening's dinner was conducted under normal security protocols, serving as both a test of their arrangements and a rehearsal for the more dangerous event to come. Prince Edmund performed his wine-serving duties flawlessly, and Marcus was pleased to note that the ritual seemed entirely natural and meaningful to the local officials who attended. Queen Alara played her role perfectly as well, maintaining her usual gracious demeanor while carefully avoiding any private conversations with the suspected Asturian agents in their party. Marcus could see the strain in her eyes, but her performance was convincing enough to allay any suspicions. The second day brought them to Riverside, a prosperous market town where the king participated in trade negotiations and resolved several local disputes. Again, the day passed peacefully, with Marcus and his guards maintaining discreet surveillance of their targets while allowing the festival celebrations to proceed normally. It was on the evening of the second day that Marcus detected the first signs of nervous excitement among the conspirators. Dr. Blackwood was clearly agitated, fidgeting with his medical bag and avoiding eye contact with the guards. More tellingly, the suspected Asturian agents were exchanging meaningful glances and having brief, whispered conversations that stopped whenever anyone approached. "Tomorrow," Marcus told his men during their evening briefing, "everyone must be at peak alertness. The moment of truth is almost upon us." The third day dawned gray and overcast as they traveled to Millbrook, the town where the poisoning attempt was scheduled to take place. The weather seemed to match the tension that Marcus felt building among the conspirators, though the townspeople who greeted the royal party showed no awareness of the drama about to unfold. Millbrook's town hall had been decorated with harvest symbols and autumn flowers for the formal dinner that would serve as the climax of the festival tour. Local officials, prominent citizens, and visiting dignitaries filled the hall, creating the perfect crowd for the conspirators to blend into during and after their planned attack. As the evening approached, Marcus positioned his guards at strategic points throughout the hall, each man understanding his specific role in the operation. Sir Thomas would watch Prince Edmund and the wine service. Sir Gabriel would monitor Dr. Blackwood's movements, and the others would be ready to move against the Asturian agents at Marcus's signal. Queen Alara took her place at the high table with composure that Marcus found remarkable under the circumstances. She had managed to maintain her facade for 3 days while knowing that her husband's life depended on the success of their counter-conspiracy. The dinner began with the usual formal speeches and toasts, King Adrian speaking eloquently about the resilience of the Valdorian people and the importance of community support during difficult times. The assembled guests responded with genuine enthusiasm, their applause and cheers filling the decorated hall. As the main course was served, Marcus watched Dr. Blackwood carefully. The physician was pale and sweating despite the cool evening air, his hands shaking slightly as he pretended to enjoy his meal. Marcus knew that Blackwood was carrying the harmless substitute that would save the king's life, but the man's nerves were so frayed that he might make a mistake that would expose their entire operation. Prince Edmund rose to begin the wine service, his movements graceful and ceremonial as he had practiced. The young prince carried himself with a dignity that made his father beam with pride, and the assembled guests murmured approval at this touching display of filial devotion. It was as Edmund poured wine for the king that Marcus saw Dr. Blackwood rise from his seat and begin moving toward the high table. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The physician would approach under the pretense of checking on the king's health, and during the distraction, he would add what everyone except the royal family believed to be poison to the king's wine. Marcus gave the prearranged signal to his guards, and they began moving into position. Everything had to happen quickly once Blackwood made his move, because the Astrian agents would be watching closely to ensure their plan was carried out successfully. Dr. Blackwood reached the high table just as Prince Edmund finished serving wine to all the honored guests. The physician bowed deeply to King Adrian and spoke in a voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but I wanted to ensure you're feeling well after the long day of travel and ceremonies. Perhaps I might suggest a toast to the health of our beloved king." It was the agreed-upon signal. As the hall filled with the sound of guests raising their glasses and calling for a toast to the king's health, Blackwood made his move. With practiced smoothness, he added a few drops from a small vial to King Adrian's wine, the clear liquid disappearing instantly into the dark red wine. Marcus held his breath as King Adrian raised his glass to acknowledge the toast. If their plan failed now, if Dr. Blackwood had lost his nerve and used the real poison instead of the substitute, they would be watching their king die in front of hundreds of witnesses. King Adrian drank deeply from his wine, smiled, and raised his glass again to the cheering crowd. Minutes passed, the time frame during which the poison should have taken effect, but the king remained healthy and animated, continuing to enjoy the celebration around him. Marcus saw the confusion beginning to register on the faces of the Astrian agents. They had expected to see signs of distress from the king by now, but instead he appeared to be in perfect health. One of the agents rose from his table and began moving toward Dr. Blackwood, clearly intending to discover what had gone wrong. This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. As the Astrian agent approached the physician, revealing his connection to the conspiracy, Marcus gave the signal for his guards to move. Within seconds, all three suspected foreign agents were surrounded and being questioned about their purpose at the dinner. The revelation that came next shocked even Marcus, despite all his preparation. Under questioning, the agents revealed that their operation was far more extensive than anyone had realized. They had been working to infiltrate courts throughout the region, seeking to destabilize governments and create opportunities for Astrian expansion. Queen Alara's role in exposing the conspiracy became clear as she provided detailed testimony about how she had been manipulated and what she had learned about the foreign network. Her willingness to sacrifice her own reputation for the sake of the kingdom's security impressed even those who had initially been skeptical of her involvement. Dr. Blackwood's testimony provided the final pieces of the puzzle, revealing how the Astorians had used threats against his family to secure his cooperation. His detailed knowledge of their methods and contacts proved invaluable for understanding the full scope of their operation. As dawn broke over Millbrook, Marcus stood with King Adrian on the balcony of the town hall, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The conspiracy had been exposed, the foreign agents were in custody, and the king was safe. "Marcus," King Adrian said quietly, "I understand there are aspects of this affair that I still don't fully know, but I want you to know how grateful I am for your loyalty and protection." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "serving you and protecting this kingdom has been the greatest honor of my life." The journey back to the capital would bring new challenges as they worked to repair the damage done by the conspiracy and strengthen Valdoria's defenses against future foreign interference. But Marcus knew that they had emerged from this crisis stronger than before, with a deeper understanding of the threats they faced and the courage needed to confront them. Queen Alara's redemption had shown that even good people could be deceived by sophisticated enemies, but that confession and courage could overcome the worst mistakes. Prince Edmund's maturity had proven that the kingdom's future was in capable hands. And King Adrian's survival had demonstrated that sometimes the best way to protect what you love is to risk everything in its defense. As the royal caravan prepared to return to Valdoria Palace, Marcus reflected on the lessons of the past few days. The greatest threats to a kingdom often came not from obvious enemies, but from those who exploited the virtues of good people, their love, their loyalty, their desire to protect what they held dear. But he had also learned that those same virtues, when properly directed, were the strongest defense against any conspiracy. The love between family members, the loyalty between subjects and sovereign, and the courage to do what was right even at great personal cost. These were the foundations upon which kingdoms truly stood. The harvest festival had ended with a greater harvest than anyone had expected, not just of grain and celebration, but of truth, justice, and the strengthening of the bonds that held Valdoria together. And Marcus knew that the kingdom would be better prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, having faced the darkness within their own walls and emerged triumphant into the light.